The cameras were already rolling when the clash began. Trump leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk, the kind that made half the audience roll their eyes and the other half cheer. He tilted his head toward Denzel and fired the opening shot. "You're just an actor, what do you really know about running a country? About power? About reality?" The words dripped with condescension, designed to box Denzel into silence, to reduce him to Hollywood glitter. But Denzel didn't blink. He leaned forward, his palms pressing hard against the desk, eyes narrowing like a man who had waited his whole life to unleash the truth. The air in the studio shifted, you could almost hear the audience stop breathing. And then, with a voice that cut sharper than any script he ever read, he snapped back. "Don't you dare mistake silence for ignorance. Don't you dare confuse applause with truth. I lived the struggle you mock from golden towers. You think money makes you untouchable, but let me tell you, pain doesn't care about your billions. And neither do I." The room erupted. Gasps, claps, a ripple of shock that Trump clearly hadn't calculated. For the first time, his grin faltered. Denzel wasn't acting. He wasn't performing. He was unloading decades of scars, experience, and reality in raw words. He continued, his finger stabbing the air as if each word carried the weight of a gavel. "You call it leadership when you insult. I call it cowardice. You call it strength when you bully. I call it fear. You've lived your life belittling others because deep down, you know the truth terrifies you. And tonight, I'm not here to play your game, I'm here to end it." 30 seconds in, the energy was volcanic. The studio audience was no longer watching a debate, they were witnessing a storm. The moderator tried to step in, but the clash had already taken on a life of its own. Trump shifted uncomfortably, his hands tightening on the armrest. He was no longer in control. Denzel was. Trump tried to regain his footing, raising his voice as if volume could rebuild his authority. "You don't know the first thing about responsibility, about leading millions of people. You just read lines someone else writes for you. I built towers. I ran an empire. I sat in the Oval Office. You memorized scripts." The audience booed, some laughed, others clapped. But all eyes were fixed on Denzel. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Instead, he slowly stood up, towering over the desk, his presence filling the studio like a storm rolling in. The camera zoomed tight on his face, every crease in his brow carved by years of lived truth. "You built towers?" Denzel barked, his voice low but searing. "I buried friends. I buried brothers. I've walked through neighborhoods where children sleep with gunfire as their lullaby while you sleep under gold ceilings. Don't you dare tell me I don't know responsibility. My responsibility has been survival. My responsibility has been to carry truth when men like you sold lies." The studio roared. Some stood to their feet. Trump blinked rapidly, caught between anger and disbelief. He tried to wave Denzel off, but Denzel's voice thundered over him, no script, no hesitation. "You see, Donald, power is easy when you inherit it. Strength is easy when you buy it. But dignity? Respect? That can't be bought. And that's why you've never owned it. You call me an actor. Well, tonight, I'm not acting. Tonight, I'm the voice of everyone you tried to silence. And trust me, the truth doesn't need applause. It shakes the walls on its own." The audience erupted into chants, clapping so hard the moderator's gavel was drowned out. Trump leaned forward, his jaw tight, trying to fire back, but Denzel slammed his hand on the desk with a crack that echoed across the studio. "You wanted to belittle me? You wanted to put me in a box of Hollywood lights? Here's the reality, you can't belittle a man who's already stood in the fire. You can't diminish a truth that's lived in scars. And tonight, Donald, every word I speak is another nail in the coffin of your lies." The cameras captured Trump's forced smirk collapsing into silence. The battle line was drawn, and Denzel wasn't retreating. Trump leaned in, his voice dripping with disdain. "You talk about dignity and respect, Denzel, but without men like me, you wouldn't have stages, you wouldn't have studios, you wouldn't even have an audience. I built the world you profit from." The words hung in the air like smoke. Some of Trump's supporters clapped, but it was weak, scattered. The tension begged for Denzel's reply. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't loud at first, it was sharp, cutting, deliberate. "You built the world." Denzel's eyes narrowed, and the studio lights seemed to dim with the weight of his words. "You didn't build the world, Donald, you fenced it off. You didn't open doors, you locked them. You didn't create opportunity, you sold it to the highest bidder. And when the lights go out, all those towers you brag about, they don't shelter the hungry. They don't feed the children. They don't heal the sick. They only cast longer shadows on the people you ignored." The crowd gasped, the sting of truth landing harder than any insult. Trump shifted, trying to interrupt, but Denzel lifted his hand, silencing him like a teacher shutting down a reckless child. "You want to claim you made America great? Let's talk about that greatness. You divided neighbors. You mocked the weak. You profited off pain. And then you stood at a podium and called it leadership. That's not greatness, that's exploitation dressed in a suit and tie." The audience broke into applause so loud that even the cameras shook. Trump's mouth opened, but no words came out fast enough to counter the barrage. Denzel pressed on, his voice now rising with a preacher's fire. "I don't need your towers. I don't need your stage. The people gave me a voice, and unlike you, I don't waste it on vanity. You see, truth doesn't need a golden elevator to be heard. Truth walks barefoot, it bleeds, it suffers, and still, it rises. And tonight, it's rising right through me." The moderator tried to calm the room, but it was useless. The audience was chanting now, clapping in rhythm. Trump sat back, his smirk gone, his fingers gripping the desk. Denzel leaned forward, eyes locked on Trump. "You wanted a show, Donald. You thought you could play me like a character in your script. But this isn't your stage. This is reality. And reality doesn't bow to your arrogance, it exposes it." The silence that followed wasn't weakness. It was domination. Trump was cornered, and the studio knew it. Trump leaned closer to his mic, his trademark smirk creeping back as if trying to reclaim lost ground. "You're an actor, Denzel. You read scripts written by other people. I've lived the real script, the presidency, the power, the deals. You can play pretend all you want, but at the end of the day, I'm the man who's done it." The arrogance in his tone pulled a few chuckles from his supporters in the crowd, but Denzel didn't flinch. He let the words linger, then leaned forward, his voice a slow burn. "Done it?" he repeated, his tone slicing through the noise. "Let's talk about what you've really done, Donald. You've bankrupted casinos, where the house always wins. You turned profit into ashes. You left contractors unpaid, workers abandoned. You wrapped failure in gold leaf and called it success." The audience roared, some in laughter, others in pure disbelief. Trump stiffened, his jaw tightening, but Denzel pressed harder. "You say I play pretend. But when the cameras stop rolling, my work still means something. Films I made inspire, teach, remind people they're not alone. What do your towers remind people of? Evictions? Broken promises? Empty slogans slapped on red hats?" Trump tried to interject, but Denzel's words rode over him, each one heavier than the last. "You used the presidency not to lead, but to brand yourself. Every podium became a billboard. Every crisis became a photo op. You weren't serving the people, you were serving your ego. And the world saw it. The history books will see it." A stunned hush swept through the studio, broken only by a ripple of applause. Denzel's eyes burned as he leaned in closer, almost whispering, though his voice carried to every corner of the room. "You're right, Donald, I am an actor. But at least I never pretended to be something I'm not. You've been acting your whole life. Playing a billionaire when the debt's piled high. Playing a patriot while selling out the very people you claim to defend. Playing a leader when all you wanted was applause. The crowd erupted again, half cheering, half jeering. The moderator tried to regain control, but the studio had turned into an arena. Trump's face flushed red, his fists tightening on the table, but Denzel wasn't finished. You think this is your stage? No, this is Truth's stage. And tonight, Donald, you're not the director. You're just another man exposed under the light, no script, no spin, just you. And the world is finally seeing what's left. The camera panned across the audience, jaws dropped, some nodding furiously, others shaking their heads. But one thing was clear, Trump was no longer in control. Trump slammed his hand on the desk, his voice rising above the crowd's divided noise. I built an empire. I was president of the United States. You think some movie star can lecture me on leadership? I had millions chanting my name, I filled stadiums, I reshaped the world stage. What have you done, Denzel? Pretend to be heroes while I actually lived as one. The roar of his voice momentarily silenced the room, but Denzel only leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on Trump with the calm fury of a man who had waited for this very moment. He let Trump's words hang heavy in the air, then cut them down with a single strike. Heroes? Denzel's voice was low but carried like thunder. Heroes don't abandon the people who trust them. Heroes don't divide a country for applause. Heroes don't stand in front of the flag and treat it like a prop in a reality show. The crowd gasped. Trump opened his mouth to fire back, but Denzel raised his hand sharply, cutting him off with the authority of a general on the battlefield. You keep talking about stadiums full of people, but you know what those stadiums really were? Crowds fed with anger, fear, and false promises. You turned pain into entertainment, struggle into a marketing strategy. That's not leadership, Donald, that's exploitation. Trump shifted in his seat, the trademark smirk gone, his eyes darting toward the moderator as if looking for rescue. Denzel pressed harder. You say you reshaped the world? You did. You reshaped it into chaos. Allies turned into enemies. Truth turned into lies. Democracy turned into theater. And now, even here, this studio, you think you can shout and bully your way to victory. But let me tell you something, Donald. This isn't your rally. This isn't your crowd. This is truth on trial, and tonight, you're the defendant. The audience erupted, half on their feet, clapping and shouting. Trump tried to interrupt, but his voice drowned in the tidal wave of applause and jeers. Denzel leaned forward, locking eyes with him one last time. You call yourself a hero, but history doesn't care about the noise. It remembers the deeds. And when the dust settles, your legacy won't be stadiums or slogans, it will be division, deception, and disgrace. And that's the truth, Donald. Whether you can face it or not. The studio shook with thunderous applause, and for the first time, Trump was visibly cornered, his lips pressed tight, his face pale beneath the stage lights. The camera zoomed in on his silence, while Denzel's words echoed across every screen watching at home. The studio air grew heavy, almost suffocating, as Trump leaned closer to the microphone with that trademark smirk, the one that always suggested he had already won the room. Denzel, he said, drawing out the name like it was a punchline, you're just an actor. You don't build, you don't lead, you don't fight. You read lines someone else wrote. That's it. The audience gasped, not because it was new, but because of the arrogance dripping from every syllable. Trump expected laughter, maybe even applause, but what he got instead was silence. The kind that waits for a storm. Denzel, sitting back in his chair, didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He let the words hang there like smoke, poisoning the air, before leaning forward himself, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on Trump's like a man aiming at his target. His voice came low, steady, but razor-sharp. You think leadership is about towers? About your name in gold letters plastered on buildings nobody can afford to live in? You think power is about microphones and cameras? No, man. Power is truth. And you wouldn't know truth if it hit you in the face. The crowd erupted, not in applause yet, but in raw, unfiltered energy. Phones shot up, capturing every second, because everyone in that room knew this wasn't scripted television anymore. This was real. Denzel wasn't acting. He was cutting through the facade, stripping away the glitter Trump wrapped himself in. Trump straightened, his face tightening. For a man who thrived on control, on spectacle, he suddenly looked cornered. And Denzel? He pressed harder. You call me an actor, but at least I don't pretend at the cost of people's lives. You've been acting your whole career, acting like you care, acting like you fight for the people. But the only role you've ever played is yourself. And let me tell you something, Donald, the world's sick of that performance. The audience exploded. Applause, shouts, the kind of roar that shakes cameras and rattles studio glass. Trump tried to laugh it off, waving his hand, but the sound drowned him out. Denzel hadn't just responded, he had turned the entire room into his witness. Trump raised his hand, trying to grab back the spotlight. Listen, folks, he barked, his voice louder now, trying to climb over the roar of the audience. This guy, he talks a lot, but he doesn't know politics. He doesn't know deals. He doesn't know winning. I know winning. I've done more for this country than any Hollywood star could dream of. He jabbed a finger in Denzel's direction like he was swatting a fly. You're entertainment. That's all. People clap, they cheer, then they forget you. Me? I changed history. The arrogance in his tone hit like a slap, but Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back slowly, folding his arms across his chest, eyes never leaving Trump. He let Trump finish, let the noise of his self-praise fill the room, then leaned into the mic, his voice calm, lethal, and unshakable. Changed history? Yeah, you did. You made history uglier. You divided neighbors. You turned pain into a brand. You sold hate like it was a campaign slogan. You called it leadership, but it was nothing but chaos in a suit. The audience snapped, shouts, gasps, a wave of noise crashing through the studio. Trump shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting to be dragged through the mud this cleanly, this publicly. Denzel pressed forward, his words cutting like a blade. You brag about winning, but who really won under you? Billionaires, corporations, lobbyists. Regular people? They lost. They lost jobs, healthcare, their peace of mind. And you? He paused, his eyes narrowing. You laughed all the way to the bank. Trump opened his mouth to fire back, but the crowd's reaction buried him. Applause thundered. The sound wasn't for him, it was for Denzel. The balance of power in the studio had shifted. It wasn't Trump's stage anymore. For the first time that night, Trump looked small, standing tall, but shrinking under the weight of a man who didn't need politics to speak truth. And Denzel? He wasn't finished. Trump finally snapped, his face red as he slammed his hand on the podium. You don't know what you're talking about. You sound like every other washed-up liberal crying about fairness. People loved me, Denzel. Millions voted for me. Millions wanted me back. That's not chaos, that's power. The studio crackled with tension. His voice echoed like a threat, but Denzel didn't even blink. He leaned forward, his eyes burning holes through Trump, his words slow and deliberate, each one landing like a punch. Power isn't people screaming your name. Power is feeding families who go hungry while you're counting votes. Power is healing wounds you never even acknowledged. Power is giving kids hope instead of fear. You had the seat, Trump, and what did you do? You treated the country like a stage, a circus, and the people like clowns to cheer for your act. The crowd exploded, half gasps, half cheers. Cameras zoomed in on Trump, his jaw tight, his hands clenching the podium. But Denzel wasn't letting go. He pushed harder, voice rising like a storm. You think a rally proves something? You think noise is respect? Let me tell you, respect isn't bought, it's earned. And all you earned was fear. People followed you because they were scared, not because they believed. Fear fades, Trump. Truth doesn't. Trump's mouth opened, but no sound came. The air had been stolen from him. Denzel's words weren't just cutting, they were burying him alive in front of everyone. The audience was on their feet now, clapping, shouting, some even chanting Denzel's name. The studio lights made Trump look smaller, his orange hue turning pale under the weight of humiliation. Denzel leaned back, almost whispering into the mic, but his voice carried like thunder, "You don't own the truth. You never did. And tonight? Everybody watching just saw it slip through your fingers." The silence after that line was electric, charged, dangerous, unforgettable. Trump tried to recover, pointing a finger at Denzel with a shaky grin. "You're an actor. You read lines for a living. I built towers, I ran a country. What have you done that compares to me?" The audience hissed, some laughing, others booing. But Denzel didn't laugh. He leaned into the microphone, voice low, sharp, and venomous. "You ran a country," he shot back. "No, you ran it into the ground. You left America bleeding, divided, broken, because it was never about the people. It was about your ego, your name on buildings, your face on TV screens. You wanted a kingdom, Trump, not a country." The crowd roared. Trump clenched his jaw, but Denzel wasn't finished. He stood up slowly, towering with presence though his voice stayed calm, slicing through the noise. "You say I'm just an actor? At least I never pretended to be something I wasn't. You put on the biggest performance of all, a strong man, a savior. But the truth is, you were always scared. Scared of losing, scared of being forgotten. That's why you screamed louder, lied bigger, and tore down anyone who threatened to outshine you." The studio was shaking with energy now, every word hitting harder than the last. Trump's smirk faltered, his eyes darting toward the cameras like a boxer searching for a way out of the ring. Denzel stepped closer, pointing a finger back at him. "I don't need towers. I don't need fake gold letters. My legacy isn't built on glass and steel, it's built on truth. And the truth doesn't crumble when the cameras shut off." The audience erupted, stamping their feet, clapping, shouting his name. Even the cameraman looked stunned, capturing the moment as Trump seemed to shrink, his shoulders sagging under the weight of Denzel's words. Then Denzel dropped the final blow of the night: "You wanted to be remembered as a king. But history will remember you as a clown. And tonight, you just heard the laughter fade." The crowd went wild, chanting louder, the sound drowning out Trump's silence. The studio had become an earthquake. The crowd's voices rolled like thunder, each chant shaking the very stage. Trump stood stiff, jaw locked, trying to muster the same bravado that had carried him through decades of headlines. But for the first time, his words failed him. Denzel didn't sit back down. He stayed standing, every inch of him radiating unshakable power. He let the silence drag, his eyes locked on Trump like a man staring down prey. Then he leaned just enough toward the mic, voice calm but razor sharp. "You see this room?" Denzel said, sweeping his hand across the roaring audience. "This is what truth sounds like. It doesn't need teleprompters, it doesn't need spin doctors, and it sure as hell doesn't need towers with your name plastered in gold. Truth stands on its own." The crowd exploded again, stomping their feet, fists pumping in the air. Trump shifted, his lips parting, but no sound came. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, capturing every flicker of discomfort. Denzel pressed harder. "You call yourself a fighter, but every fighter eventually gets exposed. And tonight, Donald, you didn't get knocked down by punches. You got knocked down by facts. By reality. By your own shadow." Gasps rippled across the audience. Trump finally raised his chin, trying to smirk, but it landed flat, thin, fragile, broken. Denzel finished with a hammer blow, his voice booming now, impossible to ignore. "You can spin your story tomorrow. You can scream into microphones and cry on social media. But history already wrote this page. Tonight wasn't your stage. Tonight, you were stripped bare. And the world saw what you are." The crowd surged, a wave of cheers, chants, and stomps that nearly drowned out the studio speakers. Trump lowered his gaze for the first time, gripping the podium like a man holding onto the last piece of wreckage. And Denzel? He simply leaned back, eyes steady, and whispered into the mic so the cameras could catch it. "Show's over." The studio erupted like a stadium, the sound echoing beyond the walls, racing across every screen in America. Trump stood frozen, while Denzel sat down with the calm of a man who had already won.